This is the unrestricted free agent.
The Jimbo Fisher stuff. Were you in the room the other day when he threw?
I was. Part of the reason we had so much fun being Clemson was because we used to talk a lot of shit to them and they couldn't handle it.
You feel fine, but your hands are shaking.
Coach Spurrier couldn't give a damn.
I want to take these athletes and mentor them.
Why can't the Gamecocks win at the SEC tournament?
So sunny all the time, so hot.
Too sunny.
Too sunny.
Fans are going to be fans, and people who understand the sport are going to talk sports.
With some weird dynamics.
It's going to be painful, but I think at the end of the day, we'll be stronger people for it.
Exactly how I would describe the last minute or two of my life right there. A little painful, stronger for it now. Welcome in. Tuesday edition, June 28th, 2022. Tim Hill, unrestricted free agent. Hope your Tuesday morning's off to a great start. See some of you already supporting the program on the live stream. DC, first one in this morning, 21 minutes before the show is even scheduled to start at 8 o'clock. With a morning, Tim, and everybody. Jason in with a hello. Anthony in with a good morning. UFAs as well. Big day for Gamecock football yesterday. A big commit in Pup Howard, a linebacker from Jacksonville, Florida. And then not too long after that, after the 4-star linebacker commits, Shane Beamer tweets it out again. Another welcome home. Says great players want to play with other great players. And could be seen as a strong move for sure. I know a lot of Gamecock fans excited about it. The actual way it was done, going to show you the video because I thought it was done tremendously. And I know I'm probably the first one to wave the flag and say, yeah, recruiting this time of year. Everybody's got something going on in recruiting. That's what college football is. The problem is that each fan base only sees what's going on with their program. And it's nearly impossible to zoom out and see, okay, who's actually making moves, if anyone, or is everybody just kind of seeing status quo? Are the really, really good programs getting all the really, really good players? And there are a few out there here or there going to other big-time programs, and that fan base gets excited about it, and then it all kind of evens out in the end. I don't think that's the case with this specific one, and I'll give you my reasons why as we go on from the Gamecock perspective. But big news yesterday with the 4-star linebacker, Pup Howard, committed to Carolina, doing it on social media, and Gamecock football fans, I think, feeling good today, rightly so. I look at the on-3 consensus team football recruiting rankings, and the Gamecocks up to number 27. So, again, take it for what it's worth. It's 11 commits, I believe, total in the class of 2023 right now for Carolina football, up to number 27 in the country. 27 in the country is not going to get anybody too excited, especially when you see Georgia at number 5, Clemson at number 7, Arkansas at 10, Texas A&M at 11, Tennessee at 12. Gamecock fans know what it is in recruiting, but to get positive momentum going, to make this now a theme in the Shane Beamer era, right? That was a tough spot the coaching staff was put in this time last year. First few weeks they could even open up their campus happened last June. So that recruiting class, behind the 8 ball, however you want to put it, the whole thing. Now, much more back to normal, a normal cycle, and the numbers haven't been tremendously impressive from a national standpoint, and it maybe took a little bit longer to get going than some classes, or maybe this is just how it's going to be now, especially with the transfer portal out there, NIL deals or considerations, and going to get to another story on that in just a minute. But a massive get for Carolina, not just that you get a good player, but who he chose Carolina over. Clemson, Georgia, notably. That's where Gamecock fans are really feeling especially good today. I think about Pup Howard. And again, we'll play his commitment video for you here in just a second. And even if you've already seen it, to me, certainly worth another look, because I think it's going to be kind of the playbook moving forward for a lot of big-time prospects, and not just at South Carolina. I think it'll be one that other big-time players can look at and say, yeah, that is how it should be done. This is how it probably should not be done, but maybe will continue to be done. Jaden Rashada is the quarterback's name who committed to Miami yesterday. And he went on social media to deny a report that he did it with $9.5 million attached to his name. That was the report from on3.com yesterday. But I mean, this is crazy to me as I read the article. So the quote is from a lawyer who has now built his reputation in being the guy for name, image, and likeness deals for big-time prospects. And this guy is saying the guy who committed to Miami actually took less money to go to Miami than he would have otherwise. And the article goes on to say that sources were telling them $11 million was the offer from Florida. $11 million to go play at Florida, allegedly, for Jaden Rashada. And those sources are telling him he went with a $9.5 million deal to go to Miami. Now, Rashada again coming out and saying that, nope, that's not the case. Well, John Ruiz, I guess, is the big-time booster that's supposed to be connected to this deal. He has also said there's not a deal in place, but then he was asked when a deal might be in place, and he said, oh, in a few weeks. Pretty much insulting all of our intelligence, right? The only way you can break the NCAA rule is to say that, yes, the reason why this prospect came to our school is because of this potential deal that we guaranteed for him or we told him would be available. That's called pay for play. That's what you can't do. But if that prospect just so happens to sign with your school and you just so happen to think now you would like to do a name, image, and likeness deal with him, then no problem, right? This is the Texas A&M Jimbo Fisher deal. Letter of the law. They didn't do anything wrong. We all understand the situation, though. And this is what the NCAA, by not doing anything other than writing this ridiculously kind of naive rule out there. Oh, well, you can't guarantee a deal. There is no pay-for-play deal out there. Okay, and what? And then this, as soon as they step on campus, then they can have the money. It's just kind of ridiculous. But this thing is mind-boggling to me, the money involved. I was really surprised by Bryce Young last year. I think it was Nick Saban who came out and mentioned that he had $1 million. $1 million name, image, and likeness deal before he'd ever taken a snap. Now, Bryce Young went on to be a Heisman Trophy winner and back up all the hype and then some, and totally worth it. Don't get me wrong here. I'm not talking about actual value. I'm just talking about money changing hands. To me is pretty crazy. So early on in these guys' careers, and then now, not even early on in the career, it is in the recruiting process, and there are numbers attached to it, and it's pretty crazy. Other big news yesterday from a football standpoint, with politics involved in the Supreme Court reinstating a Washington State high school football coach, Joe Kennedy, I believe is his name, who was fired for ignoring the district policy, the district's request, school district request for him not to pray at the 50-yard line after game. And this will get us into a larger topic of prayer in sports. And there is a very pertinent clip out there on social media I saw yesterday and retweeted from Ole Miss slugger Tim Elko, talking about the important role it played in his decision to return to Ole Miss, and obviously paid off with the national championship here over the weekend. And something that is right up this show's alley, right? As the unrestricted free agent, we can talk about what we want to talk about here. I get it if it isn't exactly the normal sports talk type radio situation, but that's where we are. And I'm looking forward to getting into that a little bit with you, and would love to kind of hear the other side of things. To me, this one is mind-boggling in so many ways, as are a lot of things, though, in politics. So maybe either I haven't considered it. I think I have considered the other side of it. I just don't understand quite the merits of it when it comes to a situation with a high school football coach kneeling at the 50-yard line after a game being deemed a fireable offense by a Washington school district, and that getting overturned by the Supreme Court of the United States yesterday. What a place we are. What a world we are in 2022. I think it is better from a radio perspective, from a football perspective, to have Luke Kuechly involved. And that was also another headline yesterday. The Hall of Fame linebacker, the Carolina Panthers, going to do about half of their radio games coming up. I guess now it's 17 games in the regular season, so that math didn't quite work out. But 7 games total, I think 6 home games, and he's originally from Cincinnati, so the Panthers at the Bengals this year. He's going to do that one on the road, and a good social media video put out by the Panthers yesterday. It's pretty funny, and we'll get that one on for you as well. Love to hear some of your comments, but I will be fascinated to hear some insight from Kuechly during the games and to see how that all works out. It's definitely the trend these days. This is not quite near the Tom Brady or Tony Romo trajectory where you're absolutely in the spotlight and making a ridiculous amount of money in the whole thing. This is much more scaled down version of that, and it's been a few years since Kuechly's been on the field, so his love for the game was always wildly apparent. And to hear the linebackers' perspective, I guess there have been a few through the years. I think Matt Millen came at it from that perspective. I'm trying to think. There's another guy in the NFL, played linebacker for the Lions, that I'm thinking of, and he's been mostly college, I think. Chris Spielman is who I'm thinking of, right? But the particular perspective, I think, is always interesting. Like Sunday Night Baseball, they're doing that the other day, and they had Eduardo Perez as a hitter and David Cohn as a pitcher. And to hear them talk about specific plays, wildly interesting. And Cohn gave a really good insight, I thought. It was, I forget which pitcher in the Dodgers or the Braves was more of a splitter kind of guy. He says that's how those guys start the pitching process, really, on the mound. They'll start, if you're a splitter or a big circle change guy, you start with your grip as that, because it is a little bit more involved than a typical grip. It's a lot easier to change from a split finger fastball grip or a circle change grip to a fastball than to do the opposite. Just a little note, and probably something that might be a given across high-level baseball. I didn't even know that. No idea. And he just dropped it, and that was it, and they move on. But an example, I think, of how guys can prove their value with just one little tip here or there can kind of change the way, or just educated me in the way that I'll watch baseball games or understand what exactly is going on. Other baseball news yesterday. Did you guys see this? This is mind-boggling to me. NCAA baseball attendance figures released, and the Gamecocks 5th in the country. In a season where they finished one game under 500, Carolina's still 5th in the country, and everybody, it was 7 out of the 8 that I saw from the SEC, and Texas, the only other one in this stat released by the NCAA baseball account, I think. Arkansas 1, LSU 2, Mississippi State 3, Ole Miss 4, the Gamecocks 5. So the top 5 SECs, and then Texas 6, Florida with the new stadium at 7, Texas A&M at 8. Incredible. I don't know what to take away from it exactly, other than even when Gamecock baseball is down, it is very important to the school, to Gamecock athletics, to Gamecock fans mostly. Now, I understand the numbers might be a little skewed with season tickets and then people who actually showed up and the whole thing. I'm not naive to that. Like I watched the games. I saw the crowd. But still something to keep in mind for Gamecock baseball moving forward now in a long off season. And actually, Mark Kingston meeting with the media today, maybe doing, I believe this will be his wrap-up press conference for the year now that exit interviews are done. Transfers have happened, 3 Clemson Tigers, most notably. In the transfer to Carolina, we'll hear his first public comments on those guys. They're certainly not the only ones. Other transfers already in, guys transferring out. I'd say maybe a little bit more than usual, but it's hard to tell what's usual these days in college baseball. Nearly impossible, since the transfer portal hasn't been a thing in major college baseball. We've always seen junior college guys coming in and guys transferring out a lot of times to junior colleges as well, so then they can be immediately eligible after that 1 year. But to see them bounce around from program to program, especially from Clemson to Carolina now, something that we have never seen, and will be interesting to hear Mark Kingston's thoughts on that. You know, he's prepared for it, and I feel like he's always been really good for the most part, nearly 100% of the time, at delivering public messages that make a lot of sense, I think, to a fan base, to fans, as a leader of a program and the whole thing. But this situation is unique for sure. First of all, that Gamecock baseball missed the NCAA tournament. That's number one. It's the second time it's happened on his watch. We all understand. I think anybody who's ever watched Gamecock baseball in the last 40 years, maybe more than that, right? I mean, even before June Reigns, Bobby Richardson took Carolina to the College World Series. The expectation for the Gamecock baseball program is always high. So to miss the NCAA tournament will always be unacceptable. To do it twice as a coach, that hasn't happened with that coach continuing to have his job in a long, long time. And that's the situation Mark Kingston finds himself in. Then you have the transfer portal to work with, and knowing that you're in the SEC, which just dominated the College World Series. Ended up with what? 4 of the last 5 teams? I think that's how it ended up, right? And Ole Miss making the Cinderella run to the national championship. Impressive stuff there. Then this attendance figure is just a reminder to me of how important baseball is to the University of South Carolina. University of South Carolina superstar Aaliyah Boston adding another trophy, adding another award to her amazing resume. The Honda Cup, it gets given to the overall best female athlete in the NCAA. You can't get much better than that. I'd never even heard of this thing. She becomes the first Gamecock to ever win it, which says a lot, right? Asia Wilson, I thought, had done everything a female athlete could do in college. Aaliyah Boston, one up in her hair, winning the Honda Cup, again, given to the best overall female athlete, with plenty of considerations taken from off the field or court into I think that the evaluation. So congratulations to Leah Boston continuing to just dominate. So my question is, what does it mean to you when a 4-star linebacker from Jacksonville, Florida, commits to Carolina and helps the momentum from a recruiting standpoint? I would say typically my first move is always to pump the brakes. Take it easy, right? We're in June of 2022. The class of 2023 is signing now. So many variables in the whole thing, but you got to have players. We all know that. And recruiting rankings aren't the end-all, be-all, but there is a stat out there that no one's won a national championship without having one of the 4 classes participating ranked in the top 5, I think it is. Might be a top 10. I mean, that's just facts. You got to have a ton of good players, and that is where recruiting rankings certainly have value. And with Pup Howard committing yesterday, the Gamecocks up to 27 in the country. Again, Shane Beamer saying another player has committed to him privately, and we'll make that. We will attach a name to that officially relatively soon when that individual player wants to make it public. But I really appreciate the way that this was done yesterday, the Pup Howard commitment. I put it out on Twitter that I've seen a lot of players through the years commit a lot of different ways, right? Especially in football, where it gets the most attention outside of a handful, a dozen of basketball players maybe around the country every year. Football is definitely the king when it comes to committing. I'm just trying to go through the mental Rolodex. Savell Newton's one of the first one that pops into my head. I think it was live on WPDE down in the Grand Strand, down the beach, and kind of famously threw a Clemson hat down and put a Carolina hat on. And that's kind of the old school way to do it, right? Not many commitments are still done that way. Now it has gone the last 5 to 7 years. I want to say it's probably longer than that. It has gone the commitment video way. And heard this before. This has become the theme. Like in this situation right now where Carolina is in, that Shane Beamer got the news and put the news out there that there is another big-time player committed to the program. A lot of times the delay in that going to Beamer and then the news coming out publicly is the commitment video, right? Got to go shoot it, or if it's already shot, then you got to finish things up and tweak it and the whole thing. And I've never been behind the scenes in any of those, but I can imagine there are plenty of considerations. But the way this one was done, and we'll watch it here, get the screen share going and the whole thing, see if I can figure it out. I think was ideal in multiple ways. So I want you to check out the Pup Howard video. If you're not watching on YouTube or Facebook, Twitter, then you can still hear the audio, and it's certainly worth a listen. I think maybe the most interesting part, actually. But we'll get that video up and rolling here for you and then talk about what you think of it. We'll see how much it aligns with where I'm at, or if you guys are a little bit different here. Again, Pup Howard, linebacker from Jacksonville, is the one who put this out yesterday. Let's see if I can do that. And, oh, yeah, pushing the buttons while talking is a fun thing. I'll tell you guys. Sorry. Thank you for your patience. And we'll get this thing going right now. As Pup Howard's commitment video at DECA Phobia. Decaphobia, I'm guessing is how you say that exactly. I'm thinking. And here we go with the commitment video from Pup Howard.
When I first started the process, there was a couple of things that was important to me. Just being able to not be too far from my dad and my brother. just having a place where I can grow and create change and create history is real big for me. To bring guys up with you is unbelievable. I'm looking for a place that has the fans, that has the support system, that has the energy to uplift. And this place does it in every single aspect, from when you're greeted on campus to when you're leaving. It's love is definitely the word for this place. I knew this place had what I needed and what I wanted. And at that exact moment, I knew this was home.
So there it is. And not too long after the video was released, Pup Howard on his Twitter account saying Justin King is a genius, and Justin King running the social media there for the University of South Carolina, and has for a long time, and has done a tremendous job doing it. And I think that's the latest example. So not just, and if you're just listening, and you haven't seen the video, it's basically Pup Howard walking around the campus of the University of South Carolina, and it ends with him walking up the football facility and walking into a room where a door is closing, but you can see Williams-Brice Stadium off in the background. The relative simplicity of it, but it's the delivery, man, from Howard himself. Fantastic. That's what really got me. And a lot of times, videos these days, especially that you see from high school football players, are usually highlight videos with music. And a lot of the video, you can't even tell what's going on because it's shot from the coach's video, and you just kind of see, it's almost like X's and O's to me. You see one small outline of a player, really, and then they're making some play in the whole thing, making some plays. This one, to me, clearly scripted, right? But it didn't sound like it. That's the amazing thing for. I assume he's 17. Anyone in high school, anyone without experience throwing these things together, man, I thought it was tremendous. Really good, really well executed on so many ends there. And I do think, man, it can set the bar and really be the blueprint for future commitment, like something to strive for. Everybody's got to be themselves, right? And I know not everyone in position to make a commitment like this is even comfortable attempting what they just did. I mean, that was, a little mini movie. Pup Howard there was the Morgan Freeman voice in the movie, right? He narrated his own video, and it was really well done. Really well done. Troy asks on the YouTube live stream this morning, which source do you go to for star ratings? I don't even get that particular, right? I've seen where it's like 3 out of the 4 recruiting services have Howard as 4-star, and the other one has him as a 3-star. I don't even get caught up in that. I go to Gamecock Central for this. It used to be Rivals, right? And now it's On 3. But I like to get to the consensus part of it. And that's why I go with the team consensus rankings I mentioned, where Carolina's up to number 27 in the country. Clemson's at 7. It's completely ridiculous, right? Getting into the weeds in recruiting. Because, well, first of all, this On 3 stuff and the fact that they're reporting this more aggressively than others is really interesting too. Talking about the Miami quarterback, the guy who just committed to play quarterback for Miami, and Jaden Rashada. They're saying it's a $9.5 million deal with Miami, and he turned down an $11 million deal. Saying there was an $8 million deal done or thought to be done for Tennessee and their quarterback commitment. Crazy to me. So I'm not going to get caught up in the stars and the whole thing. And I just think that part of the business it ain't pretty. I get it. People got to make a living, and it's legitimate for sure, right? And so Troy says Rivals doesn't have South Carolina with any 4-star players. Fine. I get it. And I know that, especially from the Clemson fan perspective, you say, oh, yeah, not worried about it. Overhyped. Those fans are getting excited about players who aren't nearly as good as the players that we sign and the whole thing. And that's one of the reasons why I can never be a daily recruiting kind of guy. But as we sit here in late June, it is important, especially for a coach going into his second year and a program that has been where South Carolina's been. Because, I mean, Troy, if you have any Carolina buddies who are trying to pretend that the Gamecocks and Clemson program are anywhere close to the same levels, that's what they're doing. They're just pretending. It's ridiculous, and you can just laugh them off immediately. That's just not what it is. But the road to get there is where South Carolina has been for a long time now. And that's why a commitment like this certainly gives Gamecock fans optimism. And then Clemson fans or others out there, maybe a little bit more unbiased or biased against, will point out, hey, yeah, that guy's not even a 4-star on Rivals. But the way these things work, and to have seen it, the Ryan Helinski thing was part of it for me. Maybe the example that I bring up that was fascinating. Ryan Helinski's high school team was below 500, I think. I know it played in a really tough region, and the whole thing's from out in California. But the fact that wasn't really mentioned during this recruiting process, I mean, because of the way recruiting processes work out typically, like a guy like Pup Howard hasn't played his senior season of high school football yet. And most big-time prospects do end up committing before their senior season. They just don't want that attached to their last year of football. Completely understand it. I get it. But to see guys evaluated at one point in the recruiting process and then choose a specific school or make their commitment public, and then they become a different type of recruiting animal, or they have a completely revamped recruiting reputation, is the strange part to me. Like the Ryan Helinski thing just kept growing and growing, even as he had been offered by South Carolina early on. To see the recruiting reputation kind of evolve and continue to rise was the first time that I'd really seen it kind of up close and personal like that. Because Southern Cal got involved, I think, in his recruitment. Stanford was a real big player. I think basically it came down to Stanford and South Carolina. And because of, I mean, it wasn't what he did on the field as a senior, but just because of how other programs evaluated him, that recruiting profile kept growing and growing and growing. And unfortunately, from the Gamecock perspective, it turned out to be all for very little. Heck of a Charleston Southern game. Heck of a game against Alabama as a true freshman. Unfortunately, that was the career highlight for Ryan Helinski, and still, I guess, up at Northwestern and trying to continue to evolve and get that program going in the right direction and make sure that he's got the starting job and the whole thing. I think split time last year. But we all understand how important defense is, how many guys have come through defensively for South Carolina and have had, let's just say this, on the defensive side of the ball, the Gamecocks have absolutely no one from an NFL prospect perspective to be backseat to, let's say, the Jatavion Clowney experience, coming in as number one overall recruit and going out as the number one NFL draft pick. Melvin Ingram's development, Stephon Gilmore, NFL Defensive Player of the Year not too long ago. You can kind of go down the list. DJ Swearinger's been a really good player on defense. Jonathan Joseph. John Abraham is a Hall of Famer. there are plenty of guys on defense that you can go with the University of South Carolina logo on your chest and say, hey, come to our school. We can give you everything you need. And I know the offensive coaches say that as well, but without having a quarterback drafted since the 80s, I think that is a different type of sell. It's a different type of reputation South Carolina has out there from the quarterback position specifically. I know wide receivers have been really good, running back, offensive linemen. You can go across the board, tight ends, right? Plenty of prospects there. It's just that notable quarterback thing has been really, really weird. And Spencer Rattler certainly can just kind of smash that thing, that reputation, if he can play well and produce and then go on to the NFL like he was projected to this time last year. And I will be surprised if he doesn't go on to become South Carolina's first quarterback drafted since Todd Ellis way back in the 80s. But a little bit different from a defensive prospect mindset, I think. Oh, J.C. Horn, I didn't even mention him being top defensive player taken just a couple of years ago, top 10 guy. So notable day for South Carolina recruiting in so many ways. And again, Shane Beamer getting the message not long after Pup Howard makes his commitment public that there's another guy who wants to come to Carolina and play. So momentum for sure. 11 guys total in the class of 2023 now for the Gamecocks, up to number 27 in the country. Which again, South Carolina's going to need all the players it can get. And the one thing that Will Muschamp did in his tenure at South Carolina was recruit. He was always right around that 20th in the country mark in the national recruiting rankings, and we saw that it didn't translate to success for him. So I think maybe he's the best example. Certainly, Gamecock fans have it recently and right in front of their faces that just because you get pretty good recruiting classes doesn't mean you're going to have a pretty good football team. Got to develop guys was the big knock, right? And not just develop guys to go be really good NFL players, Ernest Jones, but DJ Wanham and the whole thing. I mean, you keep going and going through defensive players, especially the last several years, and just scratch your head. How does South Carolina's defense not do better? Like what Clayton White did last year with the Carolina defense. I think it went from like 105th in the country. Yards per play or per game depends on, I think the per play metric is the more important one that's used more lately. I think where football analytics have evolved a little bit as opposed to just yards per game where those things can get skewed towards the end. But yards per play, I think South Carolina's like 105th in the final year of the Muschamp era, and then they improved to like 45th or maybe even 40th in the country last year under Clayton White. Tremendous improvement, and this is a tremendous get for his defense, for Gamecock fans in general to feel good about things moving forward, and that's where it was yesterday and will continue to be, I think, as long as the momentum continues. Again, a lot of other programs out there feeling similarly, but not many making a move as like four spots up. Last I saw, Carolina was 31st in these consensus rankings from On3, which takes all the recruiting services, I think, and just kind of combines them. This Miami quarterback deal, man. It is hard for me to wrap my brain around. Jaden Rashada is the kid's name. Already attached to Michael Caspino, a California lawyer who has already become the guy, right? If you're a big-time high school prospect, you're giving Michael Caspino's office a call real quick. We need you to represent us and let us know the opportunities involved in the big-time recruitment of our big-time players. And according to On3 Sports, on3.com, the NIL deal for Caspino that Caspino got for Rashada to Miami was $9.5 million. Reportedly $1.5 million less than the $11 million that Florida was offering to go play down in Gainesville. Crazy. And of course, all of this would technically be against NCAA rules, right? And all the parties saying, nope, there's not actually a deal done, and that's it. That keeps them out of NCAA issues. No problem then. Oh, there's no signed contract before a scholarship was offered or before whenever the player starts it actually enrolls. I'm sure they understand exactly the loopholes and how to stay out of legal issues or NCAA issues. Then they're good. So those numbers just mind-boggling. I know the big numbers have been out there before, but those specific ones that a guy would turn down $11 million to go play at Florida and only get $9.5 million to go play at Miami. That's the report from On3 about this new Miami quarterback commit. Let's move to the news of sports and politics kind of combined yesterday. The Supreme Court reinstating high school football coach Joe Kennedy from the state of Washington, who had been fired for praying after games. Now, I know I come at this from I was going to say more conservative bent. Well, let me just tell you how I come to this. So I went to a small public high school in the state of North Carolina, in Greensboro, Southern Guilford High School. Most of my friends were raised Southern Baptist, and Fellowship of Christian Athletes was a very big thing there. So that's where I'm coming to this from. I was raised Catholic. I am Catholic. Religion has been very important in my family. It is very important to my family. And so I understand that not everybody's raised that way. And naming this thing unrestricted free agent, of the freedom part of that, the free part of that is wildly important to me in so many ways, and has only been reemphasized here in the last 8 months or so ago, or the last 8 months or so, since I lost my job for not getting the COVID-19 vaccine. That is a separate issue from this. This is prayer in sports. And it's mind-boggling to me from how I was raised that someone would lose their job. A school district would say, no, you can't kneel and pray after a game. And this isn't like 16-year-old me or 20-something-year-old me. I'm sitting here at 44 years old now, having seen kind of the spectrum and gone through a bunch of phases in life, right? I saw Joe Burrow's release statement on the newly overturned abortion ruling. And there's definitely a part of me that understands where he's coming from, and maybe even myself at his age might have come at it from there. But now being 44 years old, having 3 kids of my own, being a little bit more experienced, I think, having seen more things in my lifetime and seen more political maneuvering, I am completely on the other side of where Joe Burrow was coming out yesterday. He says, the statement, if you didn't see it, I'm not for murdering babies. I'm for, and then used about, I think, 4 or 5 female names and examples of terrible situations that to me, hypothetically, they might have been in. Maybe these were actual real people. He didn't use last names or anything like that, but I'm sure real people have been in, and it's awful. And he's just saying that he's on their side. And I get that. I absolutely get that. But I've come to the place in life where I also understand that At some point, you have to make a decision to be on one side or the other of a major issue like abortion. And I've chosen to go on the side of, well, abortion is not okay. Somebody's got to stand up and speak for those who can't speak for themselves and defend the defenseless. And I know there are awful situations that are reasons for being on the other side of it. I get that, and sympathetic and empathetic to anyone that's in terrible situation, but that's not enough to override, to not stand up on the other side of it for me. So that's how I come at that issue. And this prayer one is a lot simpler to me. First of all, this guy wasn't even the head coach. Let's start there. Guy's not even a head coach of the high school teams. I guess it was a head coach of a JV team and then assistant coach for a high school team. But never was this situation, at least as I understand it, a mandatory type thing where players had to absolutely do what they were told in this situation. And covering college football for as long as I have and being a camera nerd and being down on the field, I don't remember a single game where guys didn't gather at midfield and pray afterwards. Well, typically it's a team chaplain that kind of gathers everybody. It's the one time you really hear kind of like yelling after a game. You hear someone trying to gather something relatively formal or organized. It's right after the handshake, and then you got players telling other players good game. And then, in those minutes, that's when usually there's someone, and in my experience, it's been a team chaplain that kind of gives the sign, says, hey, everybody bring it in. And a bunch of guys will kneel and just say a quick prayer and move on. Now, not everybody does that, and not everybody reacts the same way in the whole thing, because it's not a mandatory thing. It's not an organized deal. It's completely the opposite of that. To me, it's a completely voluntary deal. Hey, if you want to be part of this, come on in. Saw Matt Burke, a guy I really respect and actually is now moving into politics. He's a former Super Bowl lineman, New England Patriots for a long time. Minnesota Vikings actually as well. I think he got to the Patriots for a couple of years, but mostly Minnesota Vikings, from the state of Minnesota, now running for like lieutenant governor, and a conservative guy, a Catholic guy, and is much better, I think, at verbalizing values that I stand for than that I could ever do it. But he put out a video yesterday and just mentioned how spiritual a game football is. And having never played football myself, I'm certainly not the authority on this, but being around it, I can identify with that. And it, not even from a religious standpoint, right? I mean, we call it the religion of football in the South. There's something so stirring, I think, in our spirits to watch football in so many ways and be a part of it at a, however small a part of it, right? And Jason weighing in with the Vikings, and yeah, Matt Burke played at Harvard. Well done, Jason. Extra points for you. But knowing the level of violence in the game of football, let's start there, right? If you are not appealing to a higher power for your and your teammates and other people involved in the game, even your opponents, the safety to come out and to start the game healthy and to be safe and to end that way, it's hard for me to understand your perspective going in. But let's say you're completely agnostic or atheist and you don't believe any of that and the whole thing. Well, then that's where I'm really confused about where a high school coach kneeling and praying from the 50-yard line after the game, where that violates any of your rights. And very happy to see this coach reinstated and admire his fight. I think this happened in 2015. Just to show you, I think that's what I saw. The instance of him getting fired. And I guess he's moved on to Florida since living all these years ago in the state of Washington. And so what actually happens, I wrote reinstated here. Felt like that was the best way to put it, but really rules in favor of the high school coach and not even allowing, right? This is disallowing a school district to fire someone over kneeling to pray after a game. Lou Holtz always had the philosophy that every good quarterback that he's been around either had a supreme self-confidence or was very involved in their religion. And I think from a football perspective, like that's where I've seen so many guys. I mean, I'm just thinking of the South Carolina guys here recently. Dylan Thompson was the most outspoken about his faith. I know Connor Shaw has been outspoken about his faith. Perry Orth on this show has been outspoken about his faith as well. Just a few quarterback examples recently. But the fact that we got to the point in this country that a man was fired for kneeling at the 50-yard line and praying after a high school football game is mind-boggling to me. And again, I get it, that I come at it from a perspective that it was the culture for sure at my high school where I grew up. And I know the state of Washington is a little bit different than the state of North or South Carolina. I get that. But just the fact that this was ever a Supreme Court case, and it was a 6-3 ruling yesterday along party lines, and I understand it. And it's hard for me to fathom. But I didn't see anybody, and maybe it's because of the way that social media is engineered and the way that the algorithms work for me and who I follow and the whole thing. But I didn't see anybody who came out yesterday and said, boo to this, boo. Now, I did specifically click on some highly active posts out there just to see what kind of comments are out there to kind of gauge what might the other side be. And it was, well, if you're doing that for this coach, then you better be doing that for anyone who is of another religion, right? And I agree. I'll try to do that, Jason, for sure. I just know he's supremely focused right now and busy on the political campaign and the whole thing, and it's not quite something. While the unrestricted free agent endorsement, I'm sure, is very valuable politically, I'm not quite sure it would be at the top of Matt Burke's. I'm not sure that his advisors would agree with him spending a significant chunk of his day hanging out with him. But I understand that the skeptic out there would say, well, you wouldn't feel the same way about this, you being collective American conservative Christians or anyone kind of coming at it from that perspective, if he had been Muslim or Buddhist or that to me is not the issue at all. The issue is that our country was founded on the notion of freedom of religion and protecting that freedom. And the fact that this was allowed to happen is just an obvious lack of that to me. And it's infuriating. It's infuriating because of the consequences that a a coach, a public school employee, had to go against a district policy that this was unacceptable, that a district would be so concerned about getting sued by, I guess, a player or a parent or something that felt their rights were being infringed upon by a coach kneeling down and praying after a high school football game. It's that mindset that you have to be so reactionary, so cautious. And I think it's the easiest explanation to me and how I get to in my head of how we've gotten to where we gotten to in 2022. Oh, well, people were complaining, so we have to do X, Y, and Z to make it better. And not to really change anything fundamentally, but to make sure, number one, we don't get sued. Number two, it doesn't appear like we're doing this. Or number three, just to shut them up, right? As opposed to how we should think about these things. And maybe the only way that I think it should be thought about is, hey, were they doing anything wrong? No? Okay, then. That's it. There's nothing wrong there. Nothing. And I understand you want to complain and whine about it, but there's nothing wrong. So that's something you're going to have to deal with as an adult. And I understand that is not the path of least resistance. But for adults and people in charge to always default to that path of least resistance is how we've gotten to where we are in our country, in my opinion. And it's sad and stinks. And it's encouraging to me to at least see this yesterday, this rule, right? And the fact that we've had to go to the Supreme Court in our country to allow a high school football coach to kneel and pray on the 50-yard line after a game is mind-boggling to me. It makes me sad for our country moving forward. Yeah, Anthony says we're living in sad times. Well, in a lot of ways, yes. Now we have the choice to make, right? I feel like if we harp on that and only point that out, then we are just as bad as the people whining and complaining and saying their rights are being infringed upon when that is absolutely not the case. Troy says, and yet people get fired for not getting a COVID shot. I really hope the Washington State coach wins his lawsuit. That's another guest I'd love to have on here. Nick Rolovich. Man, I'm just thinking of how this will go down in history and how we will, this all will be looked at years down the line. It's crazy to me, crazy in so many ways, but good for Joe Kennedy for, first of all, not going down the path of least resistance, which would have been, okay, school district, I understand I'm your employee. I will stop kneeling and praying after game because you think that that's not okay, or you're worried about getting sued because of what I assume was probably an email. Good for him for not doing that, for standing up for what he believes in, being willing to lose his job over it, and taking it all the way to the Supreme Court of the United States and winning. And I hope that affirms so many others out there. I hope that can strengthen so many others out there who may have been in similar positions and unfortunately defaulted to, I'm going to be a good employee and do what I'm told. Or people who are in the school district or athletic department positions of strength and policy making in the whole thing, and whatever, be afraid, be concerned about making or enforcing some sort of restriction for that. Like, and everybody should be able to kneel and pray whenever they want. And this goes to absolutely the national anthem deal. Absolutely, it does to me. That's why I was always for it. It is completely your right to do that. And then I understood and absolutely think it is why Colin Kaepernick no longer was employed in the NFL much longer, because of what that represented to owners and teams and the whole thing. That's where what our country is. It's what we stand for, the freedom. Freedom of speech doesn't mean freedom from consequences and the whole thing. I know there are a lot of people that applied that to my situation. Choosing not to get the COVID-19 vaccine ended up, I got fired. That was a choice and a consequence. A lot of people think that's okay. I personally don't. But again, that's okay too, that we disagree on things. And so I would love if you have another opinion, if you know people who do have another strong opinion about this, love for you to bring them in. I got the link there at the top of the comments page. You can copy that thing, click on it in your browser, and then you can click right in here. We can talk about it face to face, civilized, respectful discussion. I think most of the time that's what we do on this show. But not going to continue to harp on that. Good morning to you, Hope. Thanks for jumping in on the live stream. However, it looks like you're doing it on the YouTube live stream today, the video version. We got it up and rolling on Twitter, Facebook, and the audio version on Podbean. And then afterwards, after we wrap things up about 10 o'clock every morning, pop it out to all the podcast platforms out there. And again, you guys can hit me up at any time. Tim Hill UFA on Twitter is the best way to do it. You have the Instagram now. You guys got in double digits on the Instagram account the other day. Pretty pumped about that. I'm not an Instagram guy. I'm 44 years old, man. You can only do so much social media, but trying to get it going over there as well. I think especially for just clips of the show and the whole thing. I think it's maybe will be a good tool, and I know a lot of you out there enjoy the Instagram, so trying to branch out, go outside the comfort zone a little bit there too. So the massive news that we've touched on first today was Pup Howard, 4-star linebacker out of Jacksonville. And if you're a Clemson fan, maybe not seen as a 4-star linebacker, just a 3-star linebacker. However you want to look at it. I think most recruiting services see him as a 4-star guy, committing to Carolina and doing it in a really admirable way. The video released on social media is nothing new. To release a video of a commitment and the whole thing, to me, it's always an example, an insight, a window into how these players see themselves, to their support network, what they will allow the kind of public perception to be. Really fascinating. And when you are a football prospect at that level, there's so many people coming at you, and you are so athletically gifted and used to, I think, being the guy, and only kind of naturally think that is going to continue, and you'll be the guy at the next stop and the next stop, and then you'll be in the NFL, and that's the way that's going to go. What I saw in this commitment video from Pup Howard was certainly confidence, but I mean, it was a polished delivery of a script, of a story that is certainly in line with what Gamecock football is selling with Shane Beamer. And I shouldn't even put it that way, is in lockstep with the culture that Shane Beamer has created, I think. And to me, that is just the latest example of where we are in 2022 recruiting, along with this story coming out yesterday that Miami quarterback commit has denied a report out there that $9.5 million is the deal he's signing with a specific Miami booster to become a Hurricane. And then On3, the service that I go by to get all this recruiting stuff and put this report out originally, also said, oh, it actually had a $11 million deal with Florida, and that got turned down. He turned down the $11 million deal to go for the $9.5 million deal in Miami. Crazy to me that these numbers are out there. How true they are, I have no idea. But I find it very hard to believe that they're just randomly thrown out there, that there's not some validity to them. And I can't wait until the day where we actually get the truth. We actually get some hard numbers or maybe evidence or whatever it is. We get the real story behind this. The 30 for 30 on this NIL period is going to be fantastic. I don't know where it's going to start. I was thinking maybe Zion Williamson start that. No, wasn't technically. I guess we have to maybe start technically when NIL opened up. I would love to know the Spencer Rattler situation, how much that impacted. I know he said publicly not at all, but his value, his NIL value out there, they have these rankings out there based off social media following and the whole thing, and you can't tell me that those are just random numbers thrown together and have nothing to do with reality. I would probably agree with you that the number attached to all these big-time college athletes in this, I've seen it on On3, this NIL basically evaluation or valuation. I would agree with you that I'm sure not all of these guys are getting all of that, or maybe it is a number that is nearly completely detached from reality. Okay. But I think the formula is probably relatively based with what's going on. I don't know. So I guess I find it hard to believe that there's no validity to it. Yeah, exactly. Troy says this is not what NIL was supposed to be. It should be tied into graduation. That's certainly a thought. It wasn't supposed to be, hey, come play for us. We're going to pay you a lot of money. And then you compare that to the other offer you get and the whole thing. This, to me, was a lot more about seeing uniforms, seeing jerseys in stadiums and saying, hey, man, why isn't that guy with that number, who is the reason that these fans bought that jersey, why isn't he getting paid some of that? Because they did it. They're fans of him. I get it. They're fans of the school and the university as well, the team. But you specifically sold a bunch of number 21 jerseys at South Carolina because of Marcus Lattimore and Ryan Brewer before him. That's why they bought the 21 jersey. Maybe those guys would have bought another jersey as well, but it would have been another player that they loved. So the player deserves some of that. Anthony's in on that, says it's going to be crazy if they ever find a way to show college players contracts on the ESPN ticker. Agreed. DC says it's always gone on. It's just weird that it's out for the public to see. It's not just weird. It's hard for me to even start to know what is close to real and what's not. Right? Like when Travis Hunter, who was the Jackson State defensive back, who was going to go to Florida State and then reportedly got $1 million to go to Jackson State, when Nick Saban called that out the other day and Travis Hunter then said, well, why are my parents still living in the same house and the whole deal? I want to side with the kid, right? I want to say, How would, if you have no proof of that or the whole thing, and then why would you ever say that Nick Saban guy is making more money than nearly anyone in the country, or more money in sports than nearly anyone? Well, but Troy, this has always been the case. He says it's putting high school kids in power of free agency. I mean, Will Wade's caught on tape saying about the strong offers he was putting out there for LSU basketball players. This is before name, image, and likeness. And again, it's one thing for us from the outside to say this has always happened, but talking to assistant coaches who have recruited, for those guys to say, no, this has always happened. And this is the first thing that is on the table right now. Well, that has a little bit more validity. And so they've always maybe had semi-free agency. Is that the best way to put it, Troy? Right? You've always been free to choose where you want to go. And you listen to everything that entails, right? And how much of that has been against NCAA rules or under the table, we'll never know a percentage there. I don't know. What would you ballpark that? But they had a 25 guys. Let's just go from the college football perspective. 25-person class every single year at Power 5 schools. If you don't think 20% of that class has had some kind of shady dealings, I think you're massively naive. We don't think 5 of those 25 guys at these major schools. And then when we get, I think the SEC is notorious for having a higher number. Troy says, but at least you got in trouble if you got caught. Yeah, and what was that trouble, right? I mean, outside of the craziness of like Lamont Evans going to jail, a couple of people going to jail in the college basketball deal. And that's never been a thing, right? What, you had to give the money back or give a Heisman Trophy back if you're Reggie Bush. But I would think it's a relatively low percentage. It had been back in the day, but I might be naive in that. Maybe it's everybody that went to a Power 5 school or an SEC school, because you got all kind of offers going out there. Well, we just saw Pup Howard. One of the reasons that was big news yesterday is Howard chose the Gamecocks over Clemson and Georgia. Those are two of the top schools. I guess you'd throw Alabama in there. Well, I don't think you have to throw anybody else in there. The best that we recruit and play college football in the last several years. But to see $11 million thrown out there, just the fact that you could fathom that, $9.5 million is that's nuts. That's so many ways. I wanted to play as let's lighten it up real quick, huh? Luke Kuechly going to call 7 Carolina Panthers games. The Carolina Panthers social media crew doing a great job with this. Shooting a video yesterday featuring Kuechly and new play-by-play man Anish Schropp. I'm going to get that for you here in just a second. Let you see what you think about that, and then we'll talk about it. Big fan of what they did here, and wanted to show it to you as we continue on here. Share the screen, trying to up the production value of Tim Hill Unrestricted Free Agent on a Tuesday morning. Let's see if we can figure out how to do it and not screw it all up. Appreciate your patience.
Jeez, Anish, you've got quite the radio crew in your first season. Jake Delhomme, Jordan Gross, and now Luke Kuechly is going to be doing some games?
Alrighty. I mean, just look at his process. Right now he's going through rookie broadcaster camp.
Keys to the defense are creating turnovers, red zone efficiency, and getting off the field on third down.
All right, faster.
I mean, he's listened to every radio broadcast since 1995.
What a real student of the game.
Anish is over here.
Okay.
You're right here in the middle.
Okay.
All right, and then you got Jake or Jordan right beside.
So, Sam Mike Will, he's been the first guy in, last guy out of the booth all month. Brian Burns beats a blindside block.
All right, next.
Tommy Tremble tiptoes for a touchdown.
One more time.
Tommy Tremble.
I think he'll be ready for week 1.
79.
Ike Ekwonu.
Okay, see what you did there. 49.
Frankie Louvu.
Oh, each time. Okay, so each time. All right.
Good one, Jake. Oh.
Sorry, Jake. Sorry.
Good stuff there. If you're just listening at the end, he puts the headphones on the cardboard cutout of Jake Malone, showing off the sense of humor, and actually what he's gonna add, I think, will be tremendous. Luke Kuechly, one of my favorite guys to watch, seemed to always know the play the offense was going to run and could blow it up most of the time. And so now I'm really going to be interested to see if he takes a page from the Tony Romo broadcasting book and tries to give us the heads up on what he thinks is going to happen, because I think he's the defensive version of Romo in a lot of ways. And these guys watch so much film and made their playing reputations on the decision making and knowing what's coming and the whole thing. That'll be interesting to see for Panthers fans. I think will only be a big time bonus coming up. 7 games is what Kuechly's going to call in 2022 in the season, and we'll see where it goes from there. But being back around the game, he says, is going to be fun, and talk to Jake Malone about it because it's fun. So a win-win in so many ways there, and I wouldn't be surprised to see Kuechly take to it and continue to do it in a larger capacity moving forward. Other headlines yesterday: Gamecocks 5th in NCAA baseball attendance. This is a note I got from a Twitter account for baseball fans. NCAA BSB is the actual account, and the Gamecocks 5th.
Jeez, Anish, you've got quite the radio crew in your first season.
Not directly affiliated, it said, by the way, but maybe just unofficial numbers. They're 5th in the country, only behind 4 other SEC teams: Arkansas, LSU, Mississippi State, and Ole Miss. Texas, the first non-SEC school there, at 6th, right behind the Gamecocks, and then Florida and Texas A&M round out the top 8 on the list. And NCAA baseball there, again, not officially affiliated with the game, but they got those numbers from somewhere, and a reminder and of how important college baseball is to the university, at the University of South Carolina. Women's basketball, pretty important as well. Aaliyah Boston earning the Honda Cup, which I didn't even know was a thing, but basically she rules all of women's sports, is how I understood it to be. Nobody in the history of the University of South Carolina had earned this. I was surprised that Asia Wilson did not. I thought she had won nearly every single award out there, but Aaliyah Boston getting some bragging rights there and earning the Honda Cup, which goes to the best overall female athlete in college sports, as I understand it. So good for her. More bragging rights for the Gamecock women's basketball program. Not that they really need any. I saw they're doing camp, I think, this week, and Dawn Staley's dunking on all of her players/counselors. That's what I've been checking out social media-wise this morning. Also, speaking of social media, we'll show you one more video here. And this is back to baseball now. Tim Elko, probably know the name if you follow college baseball. Not just that he's been a really good home run hitter for Ole Miss the last several years, but his story was just absolutely ridiculous last year for his ACL, and yet kind of played through it at the end of the year. He did, and still was a really good hitter despite having a torn ACL. They were able to stabilize it enough for him to continue to be a productive hitter. Ole Miss didn't make the run to the College World Series last year, and certainly didn't win the national championship or anything like they did this year. But just the fact that he was doing really, really good things in his injury situation made a bunch of headlines last year, and it led him to have to make a decision about whether he was going to move on to professional baseball or come back to Ole Miss for a super senior season, I think it was, and try to make a run to Omaha. Clearly, we all know what happened there. And this ties into some of what we were talking about a little bit before with prayer in sports, but wanted to let you hear this from Ben McDonald's account on Twitter. It looks like it's from the podium in Omaha at the College World Series. Tim Elko talking about how he came to be where he was there at the podium and the significance of his faith in all of that. So here's more from Tim Elko.
Ole Miss means the world to me. I had to make a decision last year what I was going to do, and I remember following the draft, I was praying and trying to figure out what I was going to do, and God told me that I'm not done here at Ole Miss, and I listened to that, and I was like, all right, well, let's do this thing then. And I came back, and it was the best decision I could have ever made, and it was a crazy road to get where we are, but I remember after we lost to Mississippi State at home, I called my sister in the car, and she knew that obviously we were struggling, and it was kind of taking a little bit of a toll on me. And I remember talking to her, and she just said, you just got to trust God. He didn't bring you back here for no reason. And I remember hanging up the phone, and I was praying out loud, talking to God, and just asking him, what's going on here? Why did I come back here, and why, this isn't going how I thought it was going to go. And I remember just hearing one word that he was telling me in the back of my head, and it was believe. That's all he was telling me was believe. And I was like, all right, I'm going to believe. I'm going to do it. And I tried to harp on that to the guys, and, keep the spirits up. And boy, was God right. We just had to keep believing, man. And we kept believing and fighting. And we won a national championship for Ole Miss, and all the past players and all the fans across the country, and for the state of Mississippi and the University of Mississippi. We did it. We're national champs.
How about that, Tim Elko? Incredible. In so many ways, I think. Just to hear that. And it almost sounds surreal, right? He mentioned the crazy path, and like too good to be true. And that's one of the things that certainly bugs me in sports, to hear guys in the midst of celebration giving credit to God. And then you never hear that on the other side, right? Dawn Staley's the best at it. I've heard her interviewed after tough losses even, and mentioning that win or lose, you give all the glory to God, but she's the exception. I think maybe people are getting better at it, right? And I don't know how many stories are out there. I'm sure there's some of other college baseball teams that thought that they were on the path to a championship as well, and thought that's what they were certainly believing in and had faith in, and it didn't work out. So I don't mean to be naive and create any kind of fairy tale story, but that's Tim Elko's reality right there. That happened for him. And I find it hard to believe that would have happened without his faith inspiring that to happen, or being there for him when it was so much in doubt for Ole Miss. So, to me, inspiring to hear guys reveal things like that publicly, because if you put that out there, that especially with social media being what it is these days, there are plenty of skeptics and naysayers out there. It's easy to take shots and the whole thing. But good for Tim Elko and Ole Miss, and that run was. It's hard to believe there wasn't. I think I call it magic, right? There's some magic attached to what Ole Miss was doing, and nearly all college baseball programs who have the run to win a national championship in Omaha. Maybe it's a little bit different than magic, or certainly Tim Elko believed it was. That kind of goes along with the Supreme Court ruling yesterday with reinstating a high school football coach who was fired for kneeling to pray at the 50-yard line. Joe Kennedy, the big ruling there. And just mentioned multiple times this morning that it boggles my mind that that's where we got to in this country, that was the result of kneeling and praying after a high school football game was fired. That's hard for me to understand. But glad at least that won't continue to happen now that this ruling came down. And maybe with that, maybe with more guys like Tim Elko speaking out, that athletes will not be afraid, will be more convicted when they speak publicly about their faith or whatever else they're going through. I think it's an important thing for all of us to talk about. You know, how mental health has become much more prevalent from a discussion standpoint, right? And we all understand now that it's healthy to get those feelings and thoughts out. The last thing you want to do is not talk to someone and the whole thing. And I'm thinking that maybe we're on the precipice of faith and other strong beliefs that may have been kept private in the past. Maybe that will become more of a trend as well. I don't know. Maybe I'm hopeful that can happen and bring us back in the other direction, right? I feel like we got so far off track in a lot of ways. If a high school football coach can be fired for kneeling down and praying at the 50-yard line in this country, what are we doing? Well, the old pendulum swinging, right? Maybe I'm hopeful that was as far as it goes in the wrong direction, and now we're swinging back in the right direction. But back to, it's been a bit of a heavy show in that way, but that's how it goes sometimes here on Unrestricted Free Agent when there are no restrictions. Today is a day for sure. I am especially appreciative of this format and you guys for joining us and being a part of it. However you're doing it, on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, and the live video stream, or on the Podbean audio-only live app. Checking us out on the podcast version of this show a little later on. And again, I'll throw it out there as many times as I can. If you think differently than me, I'd love to hear your perspective. I think that's how we learn and grow and exchange ideas and get better. And to me, that's the point of doing this on a day in and day out basis is to try to help everybody's life get a little bit better. That's all. Carolina football seemingly getting better whenever the Gamecocks get a commitment over Georgia and Clemson. Gamecock fans I know feel better. And this time of year seems to be where we are in college football recruiting these days of when you need to get guys in. And the Gamecocks get their 11th commitment, publicly committed guy yesterday, and a 4-star linebacker from down in Jacksonville, and Pup Howard releasing a social media video that is the best that I've seen. It's just that's the way I'm going to put it. And yeah, maybe it's a South Carolina bias thing, but if you guys haven't seen it, go check it out. It's from Pup Howard's own social media account, but it's all over the place. And he tweeted out not too long after the video came out that Justin King was a genius, and so clearly I connect the dots that the social media team at South Carolina connected to that video and had a lot to do with it. And it was just shots of him walking around the campus and then ultimately going in a door that's closing that has the Williams-Brice Stadium behind it, talking about the values of the program and love being one of them. And maybe that connects to exactly what we're talking about. Because you can't have a college football program based on the foundation of love, which I never thought I'd see in my life. Like loving your brother and your teammate, the whole thing. you can't have that. Let me change that. It's very difficult to have that without having a faith component involved, a spiritual component involved in the program too. That's what, Clemson caught a bunch of a mess for it from Gamecock fans, I know, but I think Tommy Bowden probably deserves the credit for it to begin with, about how much of an emphasis he placed on faith at Clemson for Clemson football families, and how much I think that attracted. I guess Bobby Bowden probably deserves the most credit, being who he was and representing those values as much as he did at Florida State. And I know you can take shots at guys who didn't live up to those ideals and values for sure through the years. I get that. And then it was always eyebrow raising, especially from the Carolina perspective, of how much Dabo Swinney would bring religion into the mix. But it definitely resonated with families, right? And clearly set Clemson apart a long time ago in the recruiting process in a lot of ways. Mark Richt was a very spiritual guy, religious guy, and didn't shy away from it necessarily at Georgia, but I don't think created quite the culture around it that Clemson football did. And I don't think you can say anything other than it was a recruiting advantage. And I don't think it could have been if it weren't genuine. And I know Carolina fans want to take shots and the whole thing, but I think even Gamecock fans have to admit there's genuine conviction there from a guy like Tommy Bowden and Dabo Swinney and the whole thing. It wasn't a contrived recruiting advantage, right? And hey, how can we be different? Hey, let's just use religion and the whole thing. That wasn't it. I really think it was who those guys were, and that would have been exposed way before now. And so now to see this coming into play, it's never spoken about from a religious standpoint or necessarily a faith standpoint. It's talked about, it's expressed with the love word at Carolina now at Shane Beamer. And as I sipped my coffee this morning, that was what I got. It was clearly delivered there in the Pup Howard video, but just how next level it was delivered and then executed video-wise and the whole thing, tremendous. I never thought I would see a big-time football prospect put a video out like that to show the world that he's coming to the University of South Carolina. Could have never fathomed that several years ago. And then that's now going to be the blueprint, I think. It has been the formula for a lot of guys. Some people still do it old school in the high school auditorium live, but they'll put it out on, they usually do it Instagram live or do it maybe live on a television network, ESPNU. Jadeveon Clowney, I was in the room there at Rock Hill back in the day when ESPN was doing his decision live on Valentine's Day, removed from signing day, and it would come down to Alabama or South Carolina, and the big news that he was going to the Gamecock. Had so much connected to it, right? Turned out to be such a monumental move, I think, in a lot of ways, positively for the Gamecock. But now to see it evolve to almost these 17-year-olds, and I know Troy hit us a little bit earlier mentioning how they're basically free agents with NIL opportunities out there. Well, not just that, right? You're kind of like actor directors or stars in these social media videos that will live forever, man. This is part of who Pup Howard will always be. And again, Shane Beamer getting a call not too long afterwards after this news came out yesterday that another player wants to come to Carolina. And so who knows what the effect may end up being. Not to go too far down that road, because we've seen my buddy Heath Klein there from 107.5 The Game. I saw him put out a tweet yesterday talking about, I think his name is Isaiah Walker, a guy that had committed to Carolina to come play on the offensive line. Then I think flipped his commitment, ended up going to Florida, I want to say, or Miami. And then he was at one of those schools recently and has now announced that no, he's going to head to another place. And that's sometimes how it works out in recruiting as well. I mean, almost 50-50, I want to say, with big-time football prospects. It's about 50-50, I think, of those who turn into solid college players and those who don't. And with the numbers involved, I think that's about right? We got 25 per class. You only got 11 on a side playing at a time, and the numbers don't always work out. And to me, I always wonder, where does that start if it doesn't work out? Like, where did you start going? Were you always destined to go down that route? Was that just how it was going to be? You didn't quite have what it took? Because it's hard for me to think that, knowing just the physical skills of so many of these guys. They're up there. That's how they got their spot. Now, there are those who are just next level, and you can tell it almost automatically. Stephon Gilmore was that guy for the Gamecocks, Jadeveon Clowney. Trying to think of other guys near immediately. J.C. Horn was pretty much that guy, I think, from when he stepped on campus for the Gamecocks. And then I think there are those guys who are just misses too. But I think those massive hits and those clear misses are pretty similar. I think they're about as infrequent. They're very much the exception. And most of those guys, I'd say probably 21. Maybe you have 2 on one end and 2 on the other in these 25 men classes. This is how I'm going to think about it. I think this makes sense, right? So if you got a 25-man class, you're talking about 2 dudes at the very top, the top 8%, and probably 2 guys on the very bottom. And for whatever reason, they were misevaluated and they don't quite match up to the rest of them. So they're the bottom 8%. And then you got, if you add that percentage together, I think I'm doing the math correctly here, you got 84% of guys right there in the middle. And half of those are going to figure out how to be good college players, and half of those aren't going to figure it out. I think that's about right. But I always wonder exactly where the half that figured it out started to go down that path and where the others did not. Were they just kind of conditioned for that? Did they not have the right people in their ears getting to campus? Because I think we've all seen instances of it appeared that it wasn't going to work out. Like Josh Vann, I think, is a great example for South Carolina. It didn't appear like he was ever going to be a really good college player. And then last year, boom. I never thought Shi Smith had what it took to get to be a go-to wide receiver at South Carolina, and boy, was I wrong that last year. So to me, those are examples of guys who it appeared to me they just weren't going to make it. And then something happened. And we've always heard coaches say, yeah, that someone really changed their work ethic or their attitude, their focus, their maturity level, their habits. So it happens in stride for sure for a lot of these guys in college. But I think so some of them are pointing in the wrong direction. Yeah. Anthony putting some more examples to this. Marcus Lattimore, massive hit. Brandon McElwain, massive miss. But, and I'll continue to go back on this. McElwain was good enough to get on the field as a true freshman in his first game as a quarterback. Right? He played. Was Perry Orth getting the start and then McElwain popping in? I think it was at Vandy. I believe that's right. Because Brian Edwards, I think, had more than 100 yards receiving in that game as a true freshman as well. But that's another great example, right? I mean, McElwain comes to the school with a great family history connected. By all accounts, gonna be the guy, right? And all kinds of skill and the whole thing. Anthony confirming those. Thanks, Anthony. That makes me feel good about the recall this morning. So clearly good enough to get on the field, talented enough to do it early on, because, you know, there are just guys, like I mentioned, that especially at the quarterback position, that you think are going to continue to develop, maybe weren't tremendously recruited guys, but you think they got enough physical skills to continue to be developed and turn into the guy, and they just never do, right? That happens all the time. Much less frequently, feel like you see guys get on the field really early on at the quarterback position as a true freshman, and then it doesn't work out from there. Now, the Carolina quarterback situation, unfortunately, at a place then that guys maybe were more forced onto the field than earned the opportunity to get there, just because of the coaching change and the lack of depth and the whole thing. But yeah, I wonder if some of these guys, and of course, you never are going to get this publicly or rarely, and this is one of those things that you probably might not even come to understand yourself. Troy weighing in with Hunter Johnson, a big miss at Clemson. I don't think Gamecock fans are feeling bad for Clemson misses, by the way, here recently. But I don't know if you ever get these guys in your private, quiet moments and say, yeah, I should not have made that decision. I think if I would not have made that decision, then things will work out differently. It's probably not that dramatic, right? It's probably a series of small decisions that become habits, and then it just doesn't work. But it's always interesting to talk to these guys when their careers are done, to hear their perspective. Love talking to Savell Newton the other day, for instance. The guy who openly admitted, yeah, I think if the transfer portal was available when Steve Spurrier told me I wasn't going to be a quarterback, I probably would have gone somewhere else. Anthony coming in with Lorenzo Nunez was supposed to be our savior as well, just didn't work out. And that seemed wildly unfair to Nunez. It's another one where you look at just production, and I get it that high school football systems are different, but Nunez didn't really throw for hardly any yards in high school. Apparently made his reputation playing 7-on-7 or in workouts at camps, and I understand some offensive systems in high school, especially smaller schools, haven't evolved in the whole thing. But I mean, we're not talking about the early 2000s or anything. Nunez was a freshman in 15, right? We're talking about post 2010 high school football, pretty evolved. And if you had an athlete at quarterback, well, you spread everybody out, you run the spread, you let them throw it and run it, you get a bunch of yards, a bunch of success, you win football games. And that didn't happen really for Nunez in his high school career. So to see him at least beating Central Florida, I guess, was something back then when Central Florida went winless that season. But that's where Steve Spurrier, that he came to the point where, yeah, that was it for him at halftime of that game. He knew it wasn't gonna work out anymore at South Carolina. But to me, that's a case of a guy who just didn't quite have the skills to succeed as a big time college quarterback. These different guys, different places in their careers, just different skill sets, different talent levels. I have no idea how Pup Howard will turn out, and everybody who screams loudly right now that they really know and the whole thing, I would shake my head at. The ultra talented guys, I get it. But Troy pointed out that I think Pup Howard, at least according to Rivals, not even a 4-star guy. Okay. What that means exactly, I don't know, except that at least one talent evaluator wasn't blown away. Again, another commit coming Carolina's way. When that will be made public, don't know for sure. But I think you can count on that happening pretty soon. What I can almost guarantee that won't happen with that is what happened with Miami's quarterback commit. That a report came out that he's going to sign a deal for $9.5 million with one of their posters. And then On3, who reported that, also said, oh, he's turning down a deal at Florida for $11 million. Oh. I think it's the athletic departments that have to hate these reports the most, right? First of all, if it's connected with your school, you got to make sure that your school is clean and didn't violate any NCAA rules, which is nearly impossible to do with the way this rule is written, as long as you're not completely dumb about it. It can't be proven that a deal was in place before you came to that school. There's no evidence of that deal being in place, and the only evidence there could be, I would assume, is some kind of written agreement. So that's the first concern, and that's a relatively minor concern. I think everybody's got that. Hey, got that old wink, wink, nudge, nudge. You know what to do here, right, man? You know what not to do. But then I think the larger concern for an athletics department is if there was an $11 million deal at Florida to get in a quarterback, maybe all that $11 million wasn't going to be donated to the school in the old school system, right, of how you support your football program is to give money. Steve Spurrier was always very clear about that. Like, yeah, if you want to have a big-time program, you got to spend money. And South Carolina people will spend the money. They just never been asked to spend the money. Well, now it seems to be that that money being spent has to go directly to the players as opposed to coming through the university and improving facilities, improving the student athlete experience, they call it. Well, now it's going to directly improve that experience or just directly fund that student athlete experience going straight to them. And no way $11 million was going to go straight to the university. I don't think it's that simple, right? But I would have to assume a pretty hefty percentage of that potential deal was going to, in an old school system, go to the actual athletics department. I think that's what athletics departments around the country are probably scrambling to reevaluate. And I know Gamecock football specifically going to announce some new guidelines, might be the best way to put it. I don't even know if that's exactly how to put it. I'll look it right up on Twitter. I saw it the other day pop up that the South Carolina law that right now prohibits the universities from having anything to do with NIL is going to be suspended for a year. So at Gamecock NIL is where I got this, and this is the official account. It says, for all things name, image, and likeness at the University of South Carolina. And then it even has the Gamecocks Online Twitter handle there. You can go to gamecocksonline.com/NIL and read more. But the thread put out yesterday was saying it's a big week for us in the NIL department at South Carolina, preparing for the inclusion, and this is where I'm way out of my comfort zone, right? The inclusion of a proviso in the state budget that will suspend the current state law governing name, image, and likeness. It goes into effect Friday. And the state law will be suspended for 365 days while it says we work towards a permanent solution. And then it says now it's just the law means that athletes at South Carolina are subject to the school, the institutional policy, and the interim NCAA policy. So basically, South Carolina will be like everybody else. And it still prohibits recruiting inducements. Go to the school and you will receive X and pay for play opportunities. You make a 3, you get paid $100 kind of thing. But a new set of guidelines will be coming out on Friday, and that's where the school says that the new content, it will happen. Education, connection, and facilitation is the 3 priorities of the new guidelines. And so I get education, you make sure everybody's on the same page. But when I hear connection and facilitation, it sounds to me like the school will be helping players connect with boosters, companies, whatever, to facilitate deals, to help make those things happen more often, easier, maybe more lucratively. I don't know. But that's where we are right now, man, in this name, image, and likeness stuff. Crazy to me. But the next step at the University of South Carolina is not having to deal with the state law that added some additional red tape, I think, that's not a part of the NCAA deal. So we got that going on this week, on Friday. That's when that officially goes down. We had actual recruiting news yesterday with the Pup Howard excitement, I think, for Gamecock fans. And again, the way that he did it, tremendous. Good for Justin King, the South Carolina social media team. Good for Pup Howard specifically. And I think maybe more notably, his support system. Helping to make sure that happened in that way, helping to allow him to see, like, you can do it in a really good way and maybe different than it's been done before. Feel like we're back to how things have been done before in a lot of ways, with the Supreme Court ruling about high school football coach and Joe Kennedy being able to kneel at the 50-yard line after a game and not be fired for it. It got us into a bit of a conversation in Prayer on Sports today, Prayer in Sports, and played a clip from Tim Elko, the Ole Miss first baseman, slugger, saying that he heard it directly from God to believe in his decision to come back to Ole Miss, and was very vocal about that with his teammates, and now he's a national champion. What a story. On the lighter side, Luke Kuechly having some fun with his announcement yesterday that he's going to join the radio broadcast team with Carolina Panthers and do 7 games this year, 6 at home, I think 1 on the road near his native Cincinnati, when the Panthers play at the Bengals. If you haven't checked out that social media video, I recommend you do it. I've retweeted it, so you can check it out at Tim Hill UFA. Relatively notable day for sure. Oh, Anthony's got a request. Mentions great show today. Need to do a top 5 quarterbacks all time from South Carolina for one show. I don't know if that would have a lot of variation, Anthony. Maybe it would. I'm trying to think of all the names, how many names that I would consider for a top 5. Okay, I got one there. Yeah, I think maybe I could think of about 10 names. Maybe we could come up with something a little bit less depressing. Maybe more, maybe guys that just went on for more successful careers. But all right, I'll definitely take that into consideration. Fortunately, we're going to have some days coming up in the next couple of months to get creative for sure in the lack of football news daily coming out. But again, we had plenty yesterday with the Pup Howard recruiting news. Going to have another recruit name go official and be added as the 12th guy in this 2023 class, that with 11 members right now, up to number 27 in the country. And again, Oklahoma sitting at 24th in the country right now with 8 guys. I mentioned that Miami quarterback, that commit. Miami's sitting at number 23. Interesting to see some of these other names up there, like Texas Tech's at 15, surprising to me. A lot of the SEC names aren't, but Louisville being all the way up at number 9. Southern Cal being up at 6 now with Lincoln Riley in the mix. Texas up at number 4 with Arch Manning being one of 15 commits. Alabama only has 7 guys, but they're still at number 3. Ohio State is number 1 with 14 guys. Notre Dame with 15 right now. Georgia at number 5 and Clemson at 7. If you were wondering about those programs, Georgia has a dozen guys in. Clemson with 14 commits in the class of 2023. Okay, that was quick from a Clemson fan there. Connor Shaw, Tommy Suggs, Steve Tannehill, Jeff Grant, and Anthony Wright. Pretty good. Pretty good list of top 5 quarterbacks there from the Gamecock perspective. Tommy Suggs, I know, predates a lot of us, but was on that 1969 ACC championship team, quarterback that team. Jeff Grant, also before my time, but before Connor Shaw, I think, maybe even widely known, I think, widely regarded as the best Carolina quarterback of all time. Also played baseball. So that's a pretty solid list there, Troy. We'll see if Anthony will come up with his list. Hard for me not to put Todd Ellis up there. You know, the numbers are interesting for sure and worth the discussion. Dylan Thompson had the most prolific season from a passing yardage standpoint. Todd Ellis, the all-time passing yards leader still. Steven Garcia, I know, would be a popular pick by a lot of guys. Some names left off your list there is all. Phil Petty, a pretty good quarterback for those Outback Bowl teams. Some other names in consideration. And I know Gamecock fans hopeful that you can throw Spencer Rattler on there immediately with what might happen this year. All part of the fun of talking some college football on a Tuesday in June. Appreciate you guys being a part of the program. Troy, Anthony, Colette, most recently getting in on the comments, especially you guys helping to add to the show, make it better. We'll see what we can get into tomorrow. You never know this time of year. But try to get some others in the mix as far as guests goes. Thanks for staying with the more heavy subject matter today with the prayer in sports and the Supreme Court ruling and the whole thing. But that's all part of the UFA experience here. Unrestricted free agent. We talk about it. If it's important, we did that today. DC, we see you there. Thanks for listening to this edition of the show. Again, 8 to 10, streaming live every single day, Monday through Friday. Please help spread the word if you can. Subscribe, comment, and like, and all that stuff with the YouTube, the Twitter, the Instagram, Facebook, however you want to do it. It is much appreciated, and it is done for today. Thanks for listening here to Unrestricted Free Agent.